Hey guys, welcome back to Let's Get Dirty Garage, where today it's time to start some assembly process. Last time, since we got the frame all painted up and smoothed out and looking pretty, time to actually start putting parts together instead of tearing them apart. That'd be a good thing. Progress. But anyways, I think we got to start doing the whole chassis build. We got suspension, steering, brakes. You know, all the stuff that can kill you if you don't do it right. So, but anyways, we got a ton to do. Shop looks like parts store exploded or parts truck crashed. I don't know, one of the two. But anyways, we got a ton to do. So let's go ahead and let's get dirty.
Is this thing on? Yeah.
All right, well here's our canvas, our starting point. So first thing I did is when nothing else is on here, you got to get the engine mounts in, because you just can't get up in this little hidey hole to get the nuts on the back. But got those in, so that wasn't worth the struggle of filming. But anyways, so what we'll get started here in the front, and what I've decided to do is to go with some tubular control arms from a company called, I don't know if it's UMI or whether it's supposed to be UMI, or I don't know. But anyways, got some uppers and lowers, and then we've got some coilovers, and then some kind of cool spindle looking stuff. So I think first step to this whole mess, I want to put these bump stops in while I got the access, because these should go here-ish, I think. So let's see if we can figure this out. Not getting in too much trouble. It's tough when your hand is bigger than the access spot, but okay. Get me one of those wrench things. This is just going to keep the rebound from making funny noises. And all torqued. Okay, we'll start with these uppers, and these got a little D and a little P on them for driver and passenger, so it's harder to screw up, but I had to check. Those are just going to slide on there. I know these GMA bodies were famous for having about 82 shims in the front end. I'll put a couple in just to start for alignment purposes, but front end geometry on these is just not fantastic. So I just stack the shims and cross the fingers. Should have a couple of them laying around here. Okay. I'll get a couple of them in there. Just 'cause. Okay, after wrestling with that for way too long, had some weld slag in there. Somebody had tried to weld that stud in and did not do a very good job. So, anyways, let's throw these lowers on here. Gotta find my right voltage. Like I said, the shop right now kind of looks like a parts store threw up, so let's see what we got here. Tap those into place. Moisturizer and in the control arms that I got, they have like taller ball joints in them, so hopefully correct a little bit of that GMA body geometry troubles. Okay. Now, next thing, since this does not have, or is not going to have stock springs in it, what I got was some Viking coilovers. And these are double adjustable and supposedly fit right into the spring pockets, and got all sorts of anti-seize all over myself already. That stuff spreads like stripper glitter. Okay, let's see here. These are going to go in shock mounting holes. Top of this just mounts like a regular shock, I guess. And that's gonna seat up in there. Let's get this spring in place. Okay. That's in there. It's going to go in there. Alright, now let me wipe this mess off so I don't have anti-seize on every part I touch from here on out. You just got to put anti-seize on the threads as you're for the adjustments of those. So you can set ride height with these, and rebound is 2 position adjustable. So I don't know, I just clicked a couple times. So alright, so what we're using for the spindles, these are actually spindles. They are 2-inch drop spindles from a C5 Corvette. I think they're from Classic Performance. And then these are the hubs from the Camaro, and they basically bolt right on. And then there's a buddy of mine, his name's Scott, runs a website called BigBrakeUpgrade.com, and he makes these brackets for the calipers and does the machining on the steering arm so they all fit. So he does a great job with all that stuff. I got brackets from him for the front and rear calipers since we're using the Camaro brakes. And that will give us plenty of brake power, I would hope, since the discs are bigger than the wheels on the original Camaro. So, okay, let's see if we can get all this monkey business in the same spot at the same time. I think it's actually where it's supposed to be. Alright, so should be in pretty good shape there after get everything tightened down. Do a nut and bolt check, but we should be ready to go on this side. Gotta rinse and repeat on the other side, and start putting the rest of the stuff together. So yeah, now that I did it once, it won't be so bad. Yeah, learn from the mistakes. We'll go from there. Okay, so got both sides on. Found out on the other side that it's a heck of a lot easier if you bolt the coilover to the lower, lift the whole thing up and tighten it up on the top. So didn't have to fight over there. So, but anyways, now on to brakes. These are the brakes off of the Camaro. So it's a 2014 SS brake package, Did get new rotors just because the other ones from the Camaro were pretty trashed, and just wanted to make sure we weren't going to have any troubles. So those are new, but since this is the hub off the Camaro and the brakes off the Camaro, everything should work together. And if you remember way back when, we actually used the master cylinder from the Camaro as well and adapted that, so got basically the whole system without the analog stuff. So, and after that is on, I got the calipers cleaned up from the Camaro, which I painted red. Because, you know, it's pretty common knowledge that brakes stop more better if they're red, because red means stop. So, but these should actually just bolt on to the bracket that Scott made me. One more bigger. Now, since this doesn't have the Camaro hubs, it's got the Corvette style hubs. It doesn't have like some decent provisions for mounting a backing plate, so I haven't figured out. I still got the backing plates from the Camaro. I may try and figure out how to finagle those in there, but for right now we'll get this in there and on. You know, they got these dingleberries that hang out here, these weights. I may end up having to cut those off because this forces like a 20-inch wheel. I don't know if I really got room for a 20-inch wheel. I think I can go 19s in the front, but the brake line should actually just kind of plop up in there. Oh yeah. Okay. This had originally a little bracket or something to hold this brake line, but I don't think I'm going to have any trouble with that hitting anything. So, okay. So we got suspension. We got start on brakes. Let me do up the other side, and then we should be in pretty good shape. Now I just got to figure out the steering turny stuff. Important. Okay, well, we've got both sides in. Went ahead and threw the sway bar in, just just 4 bolts and the end links there, but I think everything looks good. And I went ahead and made a couple of little brackets just to hold this the brake lines there. It's just basically a big flat washer and a piece of square 1/4 inch and welded a 1/4 20 nut to it just to hold that brake line here, so it doesn't flop around or anything like that. So I think at this point we are ready on both sides with suspension. Did a quick nut and bolt check, and let's start with some steering stuff. So go from there. Okay, first thing on the steering agenda is steering box. We got a quick ratio box. because the other one is like 50 some years old, so let's not go there if we don't have to. But let's see if we can find some alignment here. Easy. 3 bolts. That size. This will just keep everything fresh, and it'll help with traditional GMA car steering looseness, I guess. I hope. And I just cleaned up the original bolts and washers and stuff. They were in good shape, so recycle and reuse. One thing I do like about all this front suspension is everything is greasable, which is handy. So I got Zerk fittings everywhere. I have to go through those when we get to that point. The reason I threw this sway bar up in here so that make sure it didn't interfere with anything as we were going through. So give this all the torques. Okay, so I got a full suspension or steering, new tie rod ends and idler arm and all that fun stuff from a company called Ride Tech. Just, we want to make sure that everything is stout and solid and fun stuff like that. So let's see, going with the idler arm here. And these are next to impossible to fish through there. So I give you these little tiny access holes to fish the bolts through, but where I just wanted to make sure everything was clear of that sway bar, because they do say that, you know, sometimes the idle arm can be in the contact zone with the sway bar, so okay, so I think should be good on both ends of that. Center link goes in betwixt those. Okay, 3 tries later, and the center link is in there. Actually had it backwards, so short side goes towards the pitman arm. So anyways, now new tie rod ends, and we should be able to steer. So I did pull out the old linkage to kind of guesstimate on how long these have to be, but obviously we got to get everything aligned after we're together and fun stuff like that. So let's see if we can get this wedged in here. Do a little steering turning, I think. A little clearance. Almost felt like I was doing math there. Alright, so we got linkage steerage, so we should be in pretty good shape. Tie rods are way too long. So we'll get these adjusted up kinda ish. And see what we come up with next. Okay, well, let's move to the back end here. Next on the agenda is just hanging this rear axle. Should be fun. I do have the coilovers just hanging in there just to get something to support it on. And what I ended up getting was a Ford 9-inch with a 370 gear in it from a place called Performance. And you're definitely the most economical choice out there for custom built Ford 9-inch. I think the whole thing built to for a GMA car is like $2,400 with center section and everything. So really good deal, I think. But let's see if we can't get this hanging and then figure out all the attachments. Okay, well, that wasn't smart. Let's try going on that side of it. Brackets are going to have to be angled a whole bunch more. All right. Let's see if we can figure this out. Maybe if throw a couple of these in there. Well prepared. Yeah, I got these rear control arms from the UMI as well. And just get a couple of these in there. It's not going to go anywhere. Figure out this whole coilover situation. Okay. and throw some lowers at it here. Just enough to hold everything so I don't hurt myself. And then we can figure out all the fanciness. Alright, well that'll do for the immediate second. It does look like those might work. These are the mounts that came with the rear axle, the coilover mount, so I don't know if they're going to be long enough. Lower one's got little spacers in them, so I'm gonna get those centered. Little collars. space those out just a bit because it looks like the spring is touching. Maybe not. Touch tight. Okay, well, we do have things in, and I think we should be okay on clearances. We'll see what this looks like when we get things adjusted, but if I have to, I guess I could bring these brackets out just a little bit, but we basically have rear endage. So still waiting on the axles from Quick. They had to be custom made for the Camaro ends since we're using the Camaro brakes, but at this point I think we have that installed. Let me put some nuts and bolts and fun stuff together on this, and then we'll take a look at trying to figure out brakes and stuff. So we'll go from there. Okay, well, after fussing with this for quite a while, it became quite evident that these brackets for coilovers that come with the rear end are not going to work, because the coilover ends up hitting right here. So yeah, we got interference. So as part of that kit for the frame narrowing and so on, sent these brackets. So what I've got to do is to put these up in here and weld those to the axle in order to get everything where it's supposed to be, and the coilovers working like coilovers should. So let me go ahead and clean this stuff up, get things in position, and then we can do some zapping and welding. So that's next. Alright, well, I got this bracket cleaned up and a coat of weld through primer on it, and the constructions say, I got the axle tube cleaned up, instructions say you put a socket on this control arm bolt, so that's kind of the right position there so that you can get to that bolt, and a little bit of space in between those two brackets. Doesn't say how much space, but A little bit, I guess. That looks like a little bit. Okay. So, let's tack this in place real quick. Getting the socket off is another thing. Okay, I guess that'll work. All right, well, let's zap on the other side, and then I can get these welded in place. And then see if the coilovers will fit any better. So we will pick it up from there. Okay, well, axle is in. Gotta say it's much better geometry. Nothing hitting, rubbing, bumping, scraping, or anything else. So that's a good point to start playing with some of the brakes and fun stuff like that. So I think we're in good shape. We will see what we can do as far as putting brakes on without axles. That's should be interesting. But got backing plates and things like that I got to fit to the axle. So we'll pick it up at that point. I'm gonna have to pull this out at some point and clean it all up again and paint it, but it's good. Okay, here in the axle ends, as far as I can tell, we got these little T-bolts that hold on the bearing retainer and so on. This is a standard bearing retainer, but it's modified slightly for these brackets. That again came from Scott up at BigBrakeUpgrade.com. Does a great job with all that stuff, and what this is supposed to do is mount those Camaro calipers here, and then the axle can slide in, and this retainer goes on, holds bearing and seal and all that fun stuff. So should be set there. And from what I can tell, here are the backing plates off the Camaro, and it used to mount in 3 spots. Obviously it's going to mount in 4 now, so we've got to make some holes and adaptations and so on. And I kept these because I wanted to keep the parking brake, and from what I can tell, this is going to slide in like so. And then what I've got to do is open up these holes here, and these other ones, which are here-ish. And here-ish. So basically just putting a spot for that 4-hole mounting.
in this backing plate, and then this top bolt I think will go through here and hold that on. These will go through this portion down there, so let me see what I can do as far as opening up those holes, and then we'll see if we can't figure out how all this stuff goes onto that. So that'll be next. Okay, a little bit of tin snip and die grinder action on those. And I pulled this bolt out for this spacer here. Let's see if we can slide all that on there. That bolt should hold the top of that. These should go on the T-nuts here. I think. Maybe those nuts go on the, I don't know. Probably have to call Scott. But this gives us a location for playing with brakes and brake lines and fun stuff like that. And obviously, like I said, I'm still waiting on the axles from Quick Performance, so hopefully those will chime in here soon. But I think that gets that mounted up, gives us parking brake, and there's also parking brake cable things that Scott makes, so those got to go on there. But okay, I think we are in pretty good shape there. Let me go grab a rotor and some brake hardware, I guess, and see what everything looks like here. Those will go on there. Okay, so we'll do the other side. We'll grab some other brake stuff and see what we can figure out for getting everything mounted up on there. But I think that's where it goes, I think. Okay, well, the backing plate and stuff is in there, I think, where it's supposed to go, really. And without the axles, the only kind of reference that I got is the parking brake, but that should center that on there okay for the time being. See if the caliper, red means stop, will go on this fancy bracket. Oh yeah. Okay, well, I think that will be some awesome rear brakes. Again, without the axles in there, but everything seems to bolt up. No clearance troubles. And then what's got to go onto the caliper is the brake hose here. Take out my banjo music hose. And hopefully I can get another use out of these pressure washers. If they do weep, it won't be too big a deal to replace them, but they're in pretty good shape. And from what I remember, these hoses go up. Now, because the Camaro had independent rear suspension, it had rubber hose ends on here. I'm going to go ahead and use those again anyways. Because it's got the banjo fittings and so on, and I'll route that up in here, so maybe make a little bracket or something. I'm going to have to put a tab to hold the other end anyways, so, but I think that will do. Yeah, and then we can route the brake line wherever the brake line's got to go to that center hose. So, okay. So, I think the brake conversion and brackets are a success. Let me duplicate on the other side, and then we can take a look and see where we're at. So, we'll go from there.
Alright, so I got both side backing plates and brakes and stuff installed, and I think where they're supposed to be. Got to looking at this thing and realized that there's no bump stops, so no jounce bumpers on this axle. So really the last thing I want to do is bottom out these very expensive coilovers, and you have to buy more. So I scavenged the bump stops off of the old axle, and I think they still resemble rubber enough to be useful. So I'll try and clean that up, but I'm thinking I can probably weld that bracket on somehow, somewhere in there. So what I ended up doing is I took the springs out of this coilovers, and let's see where this kind of gets to the rear axle, so I know where it bottoms out. And that way we can figure out what we got to do for bumping the stops here, or stopping the bumps or something. Okay, so that is dead bottom on the struts. These are pretty tall. Okay, well, let me play with this a little bit, see if I can figure out how to use these if I can, and if can't, we'll figure out something else. So let me clean that up a little bit, see if it's still useful, and go from there.
All right, so here's what I'm thinking. I clean these brackets up. Here's what they look like before, and then I have some small major modifications. I kind of chopped it up a little bit, and I think what I can do is get that to rest up in here, and then still contact the frame there, and then I can just zap it to the axle. So that's the plan, and I'm going to modify that other one and see if we can't find a spot where they really want to live, so the suspension doesn't bottom out, and then clean that up and get them zapped in place. So I think that'll work. So we'll go from there. Alright, so I got these modified, and I'm going to try and leave about a 1/2 inch of travel left in those coilovers before it contacts. I think that'll be probably more than 20. And then I'm just going to try and get these in place. Can't really weld all this with that rubber in there, I don't think. So just a couple of quick zaps. Okay, I think that'll hold on that side. And then what I think I'll end up doing is pulling that rubber out. They're not easy to get out, but even harder to get back in. Trying to get these fairly even. Does not like to play nice. Okay, I think that's close enough. Okay, I think that will get us in that ballpark. Let me finish welding these on, and then I think we should be good to start getting this all cleaned up and having to repaint it and fun stuff like that. So we will go from there. Okay, so I got those tacked on, and I'll finish welding when I pull all this stuff apart, because I want to pull it apart and sandblast it and stuff. But one other thing I got to do is get some brake line routing in here, make sure that these things don't flop around or rub. So I made a couple little brackets just out of some 3/16 material. I tapped this one. Since this brake hose already had like a mounting tab on it, I think I can just put that tab, just kind of zap it on there. Only gives a little bit of no stretch or pressure in the line. And then on this other end, I just made a bracket with a hole in it and for the clip, and I can zap that on right there. And that way we'll get brake lines safe and out of the way, and no chance of pinching or rubbing or anything like that. So I'm going to do that real quick, and we will go from there. Okay, so I got all these tabs zapped on there for brake line routing. I think that'll hold it just fine. No tension in it anywhere, so should be good, and it won't flop around and rub and fun stuff like that. So I think at this point we got all the doodads and whatnots and stuff on the axle that we are going to need. We did scavenge that center brake line holder off of the Elco, and we'll use that in the center here for this brake line. So just kind of up on top there, and then we can figure out some brake line routing and fun stuff like that. So I think at this point it's time to take all this back apart that we just did. Hate it when that happens, but I want to get this all sandblasted up and primed and painted and fun stuff like that. So we'll get to disassembling and try and make it pretty like the rest of it. So big fun. Always fun to do something 2 or 3, 4, 8 times. So oh well, it's all good. By the way, ran into an old friend I hadn't seen in decades the other day, and he says, "Gary," says, "I'm getting fat." I said, "What do you mean?" "I can still fit into the same socks I wore in high school." Okay, let's get some work done. Alright, well, the axle is back in and pretty again and all that fun stuff, and I just got the control arms bolted up in the coilovers. So good news is, while I was doing all that fun stuff, the axles actually came in, so now we can get everything in here like it's supposed to be, I think. So let's say, and I cleaned up these backing plates, at least on the back side, get them a little bit shinier to match the rest of the stuffage. So let's see if we can't figure out getting these axles to seat home. So get these T-bolts in. And then we can slide these axles in. Put the retainer on, all that fun stuff. So, okay, so we got the bracket in there. These are 31 spline axles, and they come with sealed bearings and all that fun stuff. So, let's see if we can find the. And I did lube up this O-ring seal just a little bit. find the sweet spot here. And I got to do this by the braille system. Okay. We got things started to seat in there. Let's see if we can't get a little persuasion to get that. Got the helical posi in this, so a little bit tough to turn. Okay, just stuffed a little rag in there to keep that towards the end. Okay, well, we did discover one easier way to do it, so life is good. When I first put the first couple bolts in, I didn't have really enough room to get the lock washer on there, so I'm just going back and putting these in. After I drew that bearing down in there, now the lock washers fit. Okay, I think we're on track. Okay, torque spec. Alright, I think we have an axle installed. Now, if I sent these guys the right measurements, and they built these axles, we should actually be able to get everything installed. So that looks about right. These brake lines to seat down in where they're supposed to. Hopefully I made those brackets right. That should be awesome. Now, just attach the brake line to my other bracket. Okay, well, we have a completed corner. So, axle fits in there nice. Brakes are all properly aligned. Not gonna torque these calipers down yet because the wheels to move things around are not gonna fit with the calipers on it. So, those easy to remove, but let me duplicate this on the other side, and then we should have our rear axle kind of in place, and we can start plumbing breakage and stuff like that. So we'll go from there. All right, well, the rear axle is all in. Axles are in, the suspension is done and buttoned up, and got brake lines routed along kind of the front, so they don't stand a chance to be pinched. Got the snubberizers in there, so those should be good. A little bit of silicone spray, and they at least yank down in there. So
but everything looks good on the rear end. Excited for getting this thing on the road, see how things go. So I did go ahead and kind of reuse this bracket for that brake line in the rear from the original rear end. I did have to like cut that apart, you know, because the old one, the bolts were in the back and now the bolts are in the front, so I just cut that part off and then flipped it around and welded it back together. But got brake line started there, so now I just got to plumb it over to the rubber lines. But I think at this point brake lines will be next, and I did get an adjustable proportioning valve from Summit. I found a couple of holes kind of where the old one was that actually worked to mount it, so I can I'm not going to really adjust that a whole bunch anyways. The body's going to be right here, but you know, adjust it once or twice. But I think it's time to start running some brake lines, and we'll start with the long one here first, and I got the old one for kind of a pattern reference. So let's see what we can come up with, and with some brake line routing. That should be fun. Alright, so I scavenged all the old clips off the old brake line, cleaned them up, painted them. It'll save us a few bucks, so recycle and reuse, I guess. And I got a coil of stainless steel line here, and the first thing I got to do though is get it straight. So one of these handheld straightener thingies on the Amazon site, and as far as I can tell, just run that through this mess. And we can get a nice straight shot here. It's pretty straight. Better than it being circular, I guess. So alright, I think we got a starting point. Now, start with a flare on one end and get a connector on there. And I think I'll start up with the proportioning valve there. So let's put a flare on this and an end on it and see what we can accomplish. Okay, well, it's time to make some brake line flares, and let me suggest, if you don't have one of these widgets that make it kind of auto magically, you should get one, because the old school ones, you know, they'll work. You know, you clamp and you twist and you bend, but I'm telling you, these things make life really easy. And the only bad part about it is you can't take these to the car. So if you're doing like a repair on the car, you kind of got to go the old school job. But this one has a couple of different things. It has, you can do both 45 degrees and 37s. 45 is standard for automotive. 37 degrees is for AN fittings. I found out that AN stands for Army Navy. I did not know that. So anyways, really, it's really simple to use. Once you prep the line, you got to do the little whirly gig thing and clean out the line, put your fitting on,
and then drop it in the dies here. Close this up just slightly, and then there's an operation 0 that levels all that stuff out. Tighten that, clamp that baby down, and I have found that a little squirt of silly putty spray makes life a lot easier. So turn that to operation 1, and that one, and then operation 2, that one, and then you have one perfect flare. So yeah, that's a lot easier than trying to MacGyver the other one. So anyways, let's start throwing some brake lines at the car and see what we can come up with. Alright, well, I got very old school bending devices. Got this little widget that you bend it around, and got the little plierizers to make a little bit sharper bend. So basically I'm going to have to come out here for this rear and kind of make a U-turn and then go back this way. So let's start with kind of a tightish bend here. Tight as I can really get it, I guess. Just gonna thread that in there real quick and get a starting point there. I'm going to want a little bit of a bend in this direction. And back in here. Follow that frame rail a little bit. I'm going to get a wrench real quick. get us to there, I think. I think I can make this bend much tighter up in here. But I think that'll do. So let's route the rest of this here and see what we can come up with when we get to the back. Okay. Back here, I think we're gonna have to do a whole bunch of jiggling and jogging. Here it's gonna be a little bit of a turn out. Gonna go this. And then I have to go up and around here. I think if I come up around this area, should get close to where I'm shooting for. Another clamp back here, but I'm not sure how it went on or where it went. Thinking maybe I can put it right in there. can do a little loop-de-loo around this way. So, okay, well, I think I got the basics worked out here. I'll make this as neat and clean and as I possibly can with the skills that I have. And that way we'll get it in there so there's no rattles and etc. So I'm gonna chop this end off out in here and see if I can't get that finish bend in there, and then figure out how to put a flare on that end. So I think we're in good shape, but one down and like 82 to go. All right, so I realize that last one's probably a little hard to see. Sorry about that, but I got the rear one in, and I did kind of a cross one there, and we'll run this little corner one here, and basically just going to start, I think, from this end and kind of work my way back. There's a little clip that's got to go in here and kind of route it down here. So the trick to using like these pliers is not to actually bend it with the pliers, but to bend it around the pliers. So I want to bend this 90 degrees. That's as close as I can get there. So yeah, if you bend it around the pliers, you're not doing too much damage to it. So and that one will pop in there, supposedly. That'll give us a start at it. We'll make that one just a little bit over 90. So if we go back this direction, now we got to get up and over right here. So clamp those about there. Straight across, kinda. Let's go down. What direction that clamp goes. So we gotta hit the bottom of that. I'm gonna get a little bit of that out of the way. And we gotta go this way. Okay, that should wrap nice and tight there. The way that looks. Alright, now get to this side. Clamp will fit there. Yep. And we'll do kind of a turn down this here. Follow that one a little bit. Turns got to be about there, but I'm going to end up having to put an end on this first. So we'll let me chop this off, and then we can put the other end on it and fit it up in there and see how we did. So we'll go from there. Okay guys, so here's the routing that I picked out for that one. Meets up there, and the front one is in, and all along that cross member up and over to there. Not real happy with this. I want to probably tuck that in a little bit, but looks okay. And then running down the side here, up and over back here, clamped up. Put a little strip of rubber in all those clamps just so it'll hold it good. And then for the rear axle, just kind of routed them down, out and around and under, and so on and so forth. So those I think will do. Should be good flares and nice and tight at this point. So I think we got our brake plumbing in, and time to move on to other important things. Well guys, I think that's going to do it for this edition of Let's Get Dirty Garage. We got a lot done. Got the whole Pro Touring-ish chassis completed, so I'm pretty excited about getting everything in there and starting plumbing on brakes and fun stuff like that. But got the front suspension, rear suspension, axle, all that fun stuff done. So it's a good day, and listen, I appreciate you guys getting dirty with me today. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. What would you have done different or better, or I don't know, just yeah, let me know what you think. So appreciate it. Read all the comments and really love interacting with you guys. The community's open. If you got a question or a post, or just want to swap some bench racing or whatever you want to do there, feel free. Appreciate that. And if you haven't yet, hit that like button and hit the subscribe button. I sure appreciate it. And hey, listen, it's been a long road, but we are gaining ground. We're finally putting shiny parts back together, so that's a good thing. Anyways, hey, thanks a bunch for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care.